So, a backdrop, we begin with the Jeremiah text, which really kind of sets the tone of how we enter our second lesson in Romans and how we enter Christ's call for choosing and knowing that your choice will cause conflict and division. For standing up for what is right. So beginning with the fire shut up in our bones, even in the midst of our complaint and in the midst of our argument with God, like Jeremiah was arguing. I begin with a G.K. Chesterton quote that has been, I'm sure you've heard it before. He writes, "The Christian ideal has not been tried and found wanting. It has been found difficult and left untried." The Christian ideal has not been tried and found wanting. It has been found difficult and left untried. There is work when it comes to faith, or working out our salvation. So in this text of Jeremiah, we indeed learn that faith really is not that smug faith which is untroubled by questions, argumentative with God, because it has never asked any, but that true faith which has asked all the questions and received very few answers, and yet has heard the command, gird up your loins, do your duty, remember your calling, cast yourself forward upon God. It is the paradox of our struggle in this world to enter the fray and make disciples and build relationships and speak truth and justice. At the same time of our struggles internally of putting ourselves in places where there is violence and destruction and pain and grief, where we would rather find ourselves taking the path of least resistance. This is what we hear in Jeremiah. And this Jeremiah text is one of a half a dozen texts known as confessions or laments that Jeremiah, as he laments, revealing the fact that he is crying this out to a people that don't care, that don't have ears to listen. In fact, they mock him and they attack him. And so you have Jeremiah coming to God and saying, look, I didn't sign up for this. In this, you have enticed me, meaning you've seduced me into this, and I can't. It's overwhelming me. So in the midst of that being overwhelmed, Jeremiah, though, says, even if I were to keep my mouth shut or to hide in a bunker or to stuff it down, you, Lord, are like this fire shut up in my bones that I cannot cease speaking that truth, even in the midst of pain. So no one ever said in regard to the Christian life that we have been promised a rose garden or we see the world through rose-colored glasses. It is the work of faith. It is kingdom building. It is the willingness to sit in people's discomfort and their pain and their sadness and their grief, and to sit with them and not be repelled or run away, but to enter into that with God's presence and love and compassion and mercy. Even when we wrestle and we argue with God, and God likes a good argument. He wants us to wrestle and argue with him, and because that is, we're in relationship to God in that. And God can take it. But God wins in the end. And ultimately, Jeremiah comes around and says, even in the midst of my complaint, I know, O Lord, you are faithful and you are the rock and you have called me into this. And I will not be silent, even in the face of hatred. So there will be troubles enough for believers. All our lessons speak that today. Psalm 69 lays out an individual lament designed for one who is drowning in sorrows and in trouble and insulted by enemies and relatives and the subject of gossip and crying to God for rescue, which echoes Jeremiah's complaint and lament. In Matthew, that portion is one of Jesus' major discourses. Jesus assumes those whom he is addressing will face death and strong opposition, and he declares that discipleship comes with a cost. It comes with a cross, and with its emphasis on trials and troubles. The Psalm, the Gospel, and the Jeremiah text for today all indicate that God's people are not exempt from tough times, from troubles, and from adversity. And we are called into the fray because we know that we do not go alone. That's why we have a community. That's the whole purpose of having a church. And then also we know that we are emboldened by the fire of God's presence, filling our heart. So placed within the context of today, our lessons begin with lament, enter into the fire of passion through our baptism into Christ, that we are buried with Christ, and then through our gospel with the choice of the cross. It's an either-or proposition. This isn't kind of like, can I get back to you, God? Can I put you on hold? Can we reschedule our appointment? It is a decision now, to the best of our ability. Wherever you are, you respond to this gospel to the best of your ability. That's all God asks, is that you try. Like our quote from. So, the weeping prophet, as Jeremiah weeps and is broken by the violence and the destruction that he sees before him, and a community of people that mock him and have no clue. We too find ourselves in a time that we can lament and we can cry out. I can find myself in Jeremiah's complaint, and one can say, well, I was just content, Lord. I was comfortable in my routines. My Sunday morning routine I had that down pat. I knew exactly the direction my car needed to point and where I parked and where I sat, and it was comfortable for me. But now I'm feeling duped because this pandemic has caused me to re-evaluate and reform my worship and my connection. You mean to tell me, Lord, that as a follower of Jesus Christ, my eyes are open to the destruction of the human spirit? That violence against minds and bodies and souls and our fellow human being? I cannot unsee what I have seen. I cannot unhear what I hear. I lament that I cannot. How can I say then that this struggle isn't real? In a way, this pandemic has gotten our undivided attention. God has our undivided attention. And this reforming of our routines has opened us up to what it means to be the church in the world. So my heart is on fire, we should say that. Even if I try to keep quiet, Lord, it's a fire shut up in my bones. Love is a fire. Compassion is a fire. And woe to me if I do not respond. For, oh God, you have baptized me, and my life is buried with Christ. And resurrection is my name. So what is your lament? What is your complaint to God? And in that, recognize that God has put His Spirit in you so deeply that even if you tried to keep quiet, you can't. Your love is so empowered by God's presence that you cannot help but love your neighbor as you love yourself. Yeah, we can say, I didn't sign up for this, God. My days are hectic enough. And you go ahead and disturb my peace with this talk of justice and mercy. And no, I just want a sanctuary to hide in. I think we need to hear an inconvenient truth in these words because I am convicted. Because I see destruction and violence. And I'm wrestling with that fire shut up in my bones. How do I speak love into a world that is hungering for hope? We cry violence and destruction. We cannot quit you, Lord, is our prayer, just like Jeremiah. For the truth, your truth. For we know what is right and what is wrong, and we cannot deny it. Even if we were to be quiet and stuff it down, it is like a fire in our bones, and that fire has to come out somehow. So I trust that you will protect me, Lord, and save me. And I know that I am not alone in this journey of proclaiming your love in this world. The Christian ideal has not been tried and found wanting. It has been found difficult and left untried. This choice is before us, so ultimately all our lessons call us to a choice. Each of us has to answer this call in our own way. God is a dread warrior. We find it hard to live out the gospel at times, and we fail miserably. But that's the role of repentance and forgiveness and confession. We realize that it will cost us our convenience, and it will cost us time. It may cost us our lives. But our choice to follow Christ in this world will cause conflict, as Jesus says. And that choice may not sit well with others, and others may mock you and say, "Where is your God?" And all we can answer is that my heart is ablaze with the love and conviction of Jesus Christ. I can do no other. It is simple as when we meet a neighbor and we ask, "How are you?" And that we're willing to sit in their discomfort if they say, "Do you have time? Can you hear my story? I need someone to see me and hear me." That is a call into that relationship. When we are tempted to just gloss over that question, "How are you?" and then walk away before we even allow that person to answer. Because we really don't want to know the answer. We don't have time. You just may be required to get involved, to sit with, and to listen to their story. And that is the call and in our complaint. How are you doing today? Do you really want to know? Are we willing to carry the burden of a brother or a sister or a sibling? This is the question today. The fire shut up in our bones should make us compelled to sit with our neighbor and listen and get involved. Yes, we can lament the evil perpetrated in this world, but that lamentation must lead us into relationship. What does it mean for us? Ultimately, God wants our arguments. He wants our lamentations. He wants us to come again and again and wrestle with the response to the pain and suffering in this world. Dietrich Bonhoeffer writes in his work, Costly Grace, "Costly grace is costly because it calls us to follow, and it is grace because it calls us to follow Jesus Christ. It is costly because it costs a person their life, and it is grace because it gives that person the only true life." So we are people who cannot stay silent on behalf of our neighbor. From the simple act of love for someone who is going through grief and pain and sickness, or prejudice or hatred, we stand in the gap for another. That is our lessons today. Being human is hard. Following Jesus is hard. Where can I go? How can I say that I can hide from my neighbor when God compels me to love so deeply that it's like a fire shut up in my bones? So I leave that with us. And again, the Christian ideal has not been tried and found wanting. It has been found difficult and left untried. So in conclusion, let us at least try. That is all God can ask. Just try.